Life is filled with unanswered questions, but it is the courage to seek out those answers that give meaning to life. J.D. Strumpf. My favorite hobby in the world is asking people very difficult questions about who they are and what they want to achieve. And it's through those questions that they're able to reflect on what they want out of life, but also drive better insights for their audiences. So when you think about questions, try the next 5 that I'm about to show you in this week's episode of MasterTalk so that you too can reflect better, increase the level of curiosity you have, and make yourself a bit more interesting. So let's get into it. Number 1, the dinner guest question. So the dinner guest question sounds something like this. If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would you have dinner with and why? You'll get very different answers from people, ranging from physicists to astrologers to their family members. It's always fascinating for me to ask this to different people because you get a wide range of answers. And if you're feeling a bit more courageous, there's also a follow-up question to that one, which is, based on that person, what would you ask that individual that you can't find in a book or watch in a video? So that's very specific and also hints at the level of research they've done on that person. The most interesting answers I've seen from that question are generally people who answer with the person and give very specific reasons as to why they want to meet that person. And this is also great for me because then I get to Google them and find out more about them. So if you can ask the dinner guest question, you'll have a list of a bunch of heroes that you can research and learn from the people around you. Number 2, the Peter Thiel question. For those who don't know Peter, he's the founder of PayPal and started a bunch of interesting and successful companies with many of the people who were employees for him back in the late 90s. We're talking about companies like PayPal itself, Palantir, Tesla, Yelp, YouTube, and the list goes on. And there's a question that he asks in his very famous book, 0 to 1, that I love asking my friends. It's probably the hardest one in my book. And the question is as follows. What is the truth that you believe in that most people disagree with you on? In other words, what's something that you believe to be true about the world that most people don't think is true? The reason this question is so difficult to answer is because it's controversial in nature. It forces other people to say something that most people wouldn't agree with. And that's also the beauty of the question. Because if you can find an answer to it, you might actually find an insight that allows you to create a unique movement or business in the same way my answer to that question was MasterTalk, where I believe that communication can be taught at scale through video without that person being there next to you coaching you. And so that in that way, that's my answer to the question. What's yours? Number 3, the time versus money equation. Goes something like this. If you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? Most of us are always chasing after something. The retirement, if I save all this money, when I'm 65, I'm going to do this. Well, what if you had $10 million today? Would you still work? If not, what would you do? What time would you wake up? What breakfast would you eat? Would you stay in the same country? Would you travel a lot more? What would that day look like? And that's why this question is so fascinating, because it helps people think 100 steps ahead of the game. Because if you had all that money, how would your actions change? And when you reflect on that, you can start to apply those actions today, not when you're 65. And what's super cool about this as well is it gets people shocked really quickly. They go, I never really thought about that. An answer I get a lot from people ask this question to is travel. That's it. And then you go, well, do you just travel your entire life? And then what do you do after that? And that's the point of the question, is that it really helps you reflect. And that's also true with your audiences. When you don't just give a presentation, you also start to think through, why does this presentation matter to them? And what sort of transformation are they getting from what you're saying? So start asking more questions like this, and maybe you might save up a bit more money down the road. Number 4, the impact question. This is one of my favorite questions to ask, especially for people who are purpose-driven, who want to make a difference in the world, because it really helps them focus on how to do that. And the question sounds something like this. If you could spend all your time, all your resources, and all your money to solve one problem, what would you solve and why? And when people answer something very general like love, it's harder to help them. But if they answer something very specific, like, oh, based on my industry, I saw this problem, I'm gonna fix this, and here's why I wanna fix it, it's a lot easier for somebody like me to go, oh, this is what you need to work on, this is what you need to focus on. So the impact question is super fun, and it's one you can ask everyone around you to see who has very specific dreams and goals, so that way you know who you can focus all your energy and time with as well. And finally, for those of you who've made it this far and who really like questions for some reason, number 5, the 3 truths. I was 19 when I first heard this question, and it blew me away. It's a question that Lewis Howes asks on a School of Greatness podcast to every single guest that's been on his show. And the question sounds something like this. Imagine that you had everything you wanted in the world, right? All your dreams, all your realities came true. Right? You got the New York Times bestseller book. You married really well. You had amazing kids. You had a great family. You had all the successes you want, but now it's time to go. And because it's time to go, you know, your life is coming to an end. But for some reason that we don't understand, everything that you created in your life gets erased. All the books that you wrote, all the podcasts you were on, all the TV appearances that you showed up for, it all gets erased, and we don't know why. But there's a piece of paper next to you, and that's the only thing we have. And on that piece of paper, you can write down 3 things that you believe to be true about the world based on all of your experiences, and that is the only piece of paper that we'll have to remember you by. What would you write down on that piece of paper? That question is probably one of the hardest ones I've had to answer for myself. And I encourage all of you to reflect on 3 truths. If it was your time to leave us, what would be the 3 lessons you would leave us with? And if that was the only thing that we'd have to remember you by, make sure those 3 truths are good. As JD famously said, life is filled with unanswered questions, but those who have the courage to seek out the answers are often the ones that have an enjoyable life ahead. So I encourage all of you not just to write down these questions, but to sit down with yourself for a few hours or even a few minutes and ask these questions to you. And this is true for everything in your life, especially public speaking. The more you understand who you are as a person and what ideas you want to share with the world, the easier it is for you to convey those ideas as well. So keep reflecting, keep learning, and find answers to these questions that are unique to you. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of MasterTalk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. And if you know anyone who's struggling with their communication skills or their ability to reflect, send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to not just mastering their talk, but mastering their ability to ask amazing questions. Take care, everyone.